let's get started. What is the most important thing to worry about when chopping corn silage?
Hey, Jonathan, since you asked, moisture is probably the one thing that we need to focus in on the most. So we have different things going on out there across that thing. And really, we need to try to hit that silage harvest window somewhere between 60 and 70%. And so let's look at a slide here to talk about what happens. So we shoot for 65% as our goal. And then as we look at the parameters of what happens when we're too high on that moisture. So we got a slide to show us that as well. And basically, once we get above 70% moisture or less than 30% dry matter, you're going to have a reduced yield, obviously, because the plant's not mature yet. We're not setting up a bunch of kernel weight. We could have reduced starch content. Again, as that kernel matures, we add more starch to the kernel. People will see an increase in seepage if we get over 70%. You will probably have a high acid profile in that pile, and you're going to have some aerobic instability. So we want to make sure we get that moisture as close as we can. Now you see a note on here about sorghum going up to about 72%. We'll address that again in a little bit, but we can chop that a little bit wetter. Now, if you go on the opposite side and you get too dry, obviously we get too mature a corn, we have starch digestibility issues. We have fiber digestibility issues. As we get that mature, we have a hard time with kernel processing. And then our stover particle size, or the stalk and the leaves, start to get a little stringy. When we get too dry and big particle size, we have poor packing. So we don't do good with our cubic feet per pounds per cubic feet. I lost my mind for a second there. And then we have poor silage fermentation. So once we get those pieces right, again, that's really where we need to focus, is somewhere between 60 and 70%. Our target's 65. We'd love 68. So that's a little detail there.
So, Jeff, you made a really good point about moisture, and somebody might argue with you that maturity is more important, because they may want to make sure that kernel's not mature, that they get that kernel able to splatter it and get it broken up, and they might actually be getting it chopped too wet, too moist. And of course, that leads to some of those challenges that you just mentioned. So, if somebody was to ask me what's more important, I mean, isn't really maturity more important because you're focused on quality? And I'm going to say no. It's absolutely most important to preserve the feed that you grew, so that the cows can eat it and not make them sick in the process. Having good quality feed is great, but we definitely have to preserve it.